My brother's wedding in Portugal was supposed to be the happiest day of our family's year. I found out it was a crime scene at 9 inches the morning when 43 missed calls lit up my phone like a fire alarm. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened. I am not a cruel person. I've never wanted bad things for the people I grew up with. I sent birthday cards. I showed up to holidays even when it cost me $400 in flights and 2 vacation days I couldn't afford to lose. I called my mother every Sunday for 11 years, even the Sundays after she told me I was too focused on work to ever be truly happy. I did all of it, consistently, without complaint, because I believed that was what love looked like. I was wrong. What I was doing wasn't love. It was a payment plan, and I didn't even know I had signed the contract. My name is Claire. I am 31 years old. I am a hospital billing compliance officer at a large healthcare system in Denver, Colorado. My job, in plain terms, is to understand exactly how insurance fraud works so I can make sure our institution doesn't commit it. I know the codes. I know the loopholes. I know what a fraudulent claim looks like from 40 yards away, and I know exactly which federal agency to call when I find one. This detail will matter later. My brother, I'll call him Daniel, got engaged 14 months ago to a woman he met at a business conference in Miami. She was lovely, from what I could see. Smart, put together, the kind of person who sent thank you notes after dinner parties. Her family had money, real money, the kind that came with a last name people recognized. Daniel had been riding that energy ever since the proposal, letting it inflate him like a balloon at a parade. He started talking differently. He started dressing differently. He started referring to his future in-laws' villa in the Algarve region of Portugal as our venue, like he had built it himself. I liked her well enough. What I didn't like was watching my parents dissolve themselves in the process of keeping up with her family. My mother started getting her nails done weekly. My father bought a blazer that cost more than my first semester of college textbooks. They started speaking about the wedding the way people speak about a coronation, as though their attendance was not just a privilege, but a transformation. Like flying to Portugal would somehow make them different people when they landed. I knew the finances. I always knew the finances because nobody else in my family would look at them directly. My parents had been underwater for years. My father took an early retirement package 6 years ago that was smaller than he had anticipated. My mother had a part-time job at a garden center that she described as a hobby with a paycheck. They had refinanced their home in Ohio once. Their credit cards were not maxed, but they were not comfortable either. And yet somehow, when Daniel's future in-laws floated the idea of a destination wedding at a private estate on the Portuguese coast with 40 guests, a private chef, and a 3-night accommodation package for the immediate families, my parents said yes without blinking. They didn't just say yes. They volunteered to cover expenses for my grandmother and my aunt because they didn't want the bride's family to think our side couldn't handle it. I told my mother privately, 6 months before the wedding, that I was worried about the cost. She told me I had always been the negative one. Daniel told me I was jealous because he was moving forward in life, and I was still hiding behind a desk in Colorado. I stopped bringing it up. I did not stop watching. I chose not to go to the wedding. I told the family I had a compliance audit scheduled that week, that I couldn't reschedule. This was partially true. The audit existed. I could have rescheduled it. The real reason was simpler and harder to say out loud. I did not want to stand in a beautiful place and watch my family spend money they didn't have while pretending to be something they weren't and treating me, once again, like a +1 to my own brother's life. I had been the responsible one for so long that I had become invisible. I was only seen when something needed fixing. I decided, for once, to just not be there. My mother cried on the phone when I told her. My father said I was selfish. Daniel sent me a 3-paragraph text about how I had always undermined his happiness and that maybe it was better I didn't come because my energy was not the vibe they were going for. I said I understood, wished him genuine happiness, and meant it. I plugged my phone in, turned on the Do Not Disturb setting, and went to sleep at 10:30 on a Friday night feeling, for the first time in months, like I could breathe. The wedding was on a Saturday in late September. I followed along the way. You do when you're not there, but you're still a person with feelings about people you love, through photographs posted to Instagram, through the family group chat that I had muted but not left. The venue looked extraordinary. Stone walls draped in bougainvillea, a terrace overlooking the Atlantic, long tables lit with candles at dusk. My mother looked beautiful in a dusty blue dress. My father looked proud and slightly sunburned. Daniel looked happy in a way I hadn't seen him look in years. I felt a complicated mix of things. I was glad he was happy. I was lonely in a way I couldn't quite name. I went to bed early, told myself I had made the right choice, and slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Which is why the 43 missed calls at 9 inches the morning hit me like cold water thrown directly at my face. I stared at my phone screen in the dark of my bedroom, trying to understand what I was looking at. My father, 11 calls. My mother, 14 calls. Daniel, 4 calls. My aunt, 6 calls. Numbers I didn't recognize with Portuguese country codes, 8 more. Voicemails stacked up like a collapsed wall. The texts were worse. A wall of words in all capitals, incomplete sentences, the kind of writing that only happens when hands are shaking. Something happened. Call us. Emergency. Claire, please. Where are you? Answer the phone. Claire. My heart was pounding before I was even fully awake. I called my father first because his voice is the one I default to when I'm scared, even now, even after everything. He answered before the first ring had finished. His voice was wrong, flattened. The kind of flat that comes after a person has been crying for a long time and run out of whatever fuel tears require. She left, he said. She left during the reception. I sat up in bed. Who left? The bride. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob. Her whole family. They weren't there after dinner. Their cars were gone. Her father's phone went straight to voicemail. Daniel went to their suite and it was empty. I felt my stomach drop. What do you mean empty? Cleaned out. Like they had never been there. She left a note. It said she was sorry, that she wasn't ready, that Daniel deserved someone who could love him the way he needed. He stopped. The caterer is still here. The florist wants to be paid. The estate manager is asking about the balance on the property rental. Claire, the balance on the property rental. Something cold moved through me. How much? 38,000 euros for the estate. We put down half we used a payment plan, a line of credit, and the second half was supposed to come from the bride's family's contribution. They were supposed to wire it before the wedding. They never did. I closed my eyes. Dad, how did you cover the deposit? We found a way. Your mother and I, we used everything we had available. What does that mean? What does everything you had available mean specifically? He was quiet for too long. Just various accounts. We had access to some things. It all went through fine, it processed fine. We just need to cover the second half now. And we thought maybe if you could just wire Dad. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Stop. Slow down. What accounts? He started to say something about how they would explain everything when they got home. That right now the important thing was Daniel. That my brother was sitting in a courtyard in Portugal in his wedding suit with no wife and a bill he couldn't pay. I stopped him. Put Daniel on the phone. My brother's voice when he came on sounded like something that had been left out in the rain. Small and soaked through. I felt a surge of real, unguarded love for him. The kind you feel for a sibling when the performance drops and you're just two people who grew up in the same house looking at each other across a hard moment. I didn't know, he said, before I could say anything. I didn't know she was going to do this. I really thought this was real. I know, I said. And I did know. I believed him. Are you okay? Are you physically okay? I'm fine. I'm just. He stopped. Mom and Dad need help with the venue balance. It's a lot of money, Claire. If we don't pay it by checkout tomorrow, they're going to pursue it legally. The estate manager is talking about contacting local authorities. How much is the outstanding balance? 19,000 euros. I did the conversion in my head. Just over $20,000. Daniel, I don't have $20,000 in liquid cash sitting somewhere. You make good money. Making good money and having $20,000 available at 4 a.m. to wire internationally are two different things. He went quiet. Then, Mom and Dad said you could authorize it from the account. I went very still. What account? The account. Mom said she had taken care of arranging access. She said you had agreed to it. My mouth went dry. I never agreed to anything. She said it was already set up. I kept my voice completely level, the way I do at work when something in a billing file looks wrong and I need to keep reading before I say what I think I'm seeing. Daniel, I need you to give the phone back to Dad, right now. When my father came back on, I asked him one question. Tell me exactly how you covered the deposit. Another long silence. We found a solution. Dad, your mother knew a way. She said you wouldn't mind, that you never use it, that we were going to pay it back before you even noticed. I got out of bed. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop, and while my father was still on the phone, still making soft, evasive sounds about solutions and access and paying everything back, I logged into my online banking portal. Everything looked normal. I logged into my credit monitoring account. I hadn't checked it in about 6 weeks because I had no reason to. My credit was excellent. My financial life was boring and disciplined and intentional, which is the way I wanted it. The dashboard loaded. There was a red banner at the top. New inquiry detected 47 days ago. Creditor, Harmony Health Credit Services. Account type, personal line of credit. Approved limit, $22,000. Current balance drawn, $18,500. I stared at it. I read it twice. I read it a third time. I clicked through to the inquiry details. The application had been submitted online. The IP address on the application traced to a location in Dayton, Ohio. My parents' address. The application had been completed with my full legal name, my date of birth, my social security number, and my home address in Denver. My mother's email address was listed as a secondary contact. The account had been opened, approved, and drawn down in the span of 4 days. My hands were steady. This is something I've noticed about myself in moments of genuine crisis. I don't shake. I get very, very quiet. The anger doesn't come loud. It comes in like a tide, slow and covering everything. Mom took out a line of credit in my name, I said. It wasn't a question. My father didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had changed again. The broken, wet quality was gone. What replaced it was something I recognized from my childhood. A hardening. The voice he used when he had decided that offense was the best defense. We needed the money, Claire. You have perfect credit. You never use it. It went through without a problem. You opened a financial account using my identity without my knowledge or consent. We're your parents. That's not an answer. It absolutely is an answer. We raised you. We gave you everything. You're sitting in Denver in your nice apartment with your nice salary, and you couldn't even show up to your brother's wedding, and all we needed was... Stop. My voice was so calm, it surprised even me. Let me tell you what you did. You committed identity theft. You committed financial fraud. You opened a credit account in my name using my social security number without authorization, which is a federal crime. The account is currently carrying an $18,500 balance. And now you want me to access that account, the fraudulent account you opened in my name, to wire money to Portugal, to cover a debt on a property I have never seen. Silence. And if I do that, I continued, I am acknowledging the debt as mine. I am completing the transaction. I am covering up what you did. More silence. Then my mother's voice, suddenly on the line, sharp and defensive in the way it gets when she has been caught at something and has decided the best move is to reframe the story entirely. We were going to pay it back, Claire. The plan was always to pay it back. Giovanna's family was supposed to contribute to the venue cost, and that would have covered everything, and you never would have known. We were protecting you from the stress of it. You were protecting yourselves. Don't take that tone with me. You want to talk about crimes? You abandon your family. Your brother is sitting in a foreign country with no money and no wife, and you're giving me a lecture about federal statutes? Mom, I was still calm. I don't fully understand why I was still calm. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am going to ask you once to put whoever is in charge of the property on the phone, not the estate manager, the senior person, the owner's representative. Why? Because I need to speak to someone with authority before I make any calls to my bank. I heard shuffling, muffled arguing, and then a woman's voice came on the line, cool and professional, with a slight British accent, that suggested she had been managing estates for wealthy Europeans long enough to have heard every possible variation of this kind of phone call. I introduced myself. I told her my name. I told her I was currently in Denver, Colorado, and that I had been in Denver, Colorado for the past 3 months without travel. I told her that I had just become aware that a line of credit may have been fraudulently opened in my name and potentially used in connection with the deposit on this property, and that I was in the process of determining the full extent of that fraud before taking next steps. She was very quiet for a moment. Then she said she appreciated my directness and would note this conversation for her records. I asked her if the names on the reservation and deposit documentation were mine. She said she would need to check. She put me on hold. When she came back, she confirmed that the reservation had been made in the name of Claire Donovan, my name, with a billing address in Ohio, which was not my address. I said, "Thank you. I want you to know that I did not make this reservation. I did not authorize this reservation, and I will be reporting this to my bank's fraud department and to the appropriate federal authorities within the next hour. Whatever dispute process you have for fraudulent bookings, I'd recommend initiating it. The individuals present at the property are my parents and my brother. They are aware of this conversation." My mother started screaming. I could hear her in the background, a high, wild sound that I recognized because I had spent my whole childhood trying to prevent it. Tiptoeing around her moods, smoothing things over, being the good one, the quiet one, the one who fixed things so the house would stay calm. I didn't try to prevent it this time. I asked the woman if she needed anything further from me for her records. She said no, and thanked me again. I hung up. My father called back before I had even set the phone down. I let it ring. He called again. I let it ring again. My mother called. I let it ring. My aunt called, which meant the family communications tree was already activating, which meant within the hour there would be cousins and my grandmother and various people who had nothing to do with any of this calling to tell me what kind of person I was. I opened my banking app. I called the 24-hour fraud line. I explained the situation methodically, the way I explain billing discrepancies at work chronologically, with specifics, without emotion. The representative was professional and thorough. I gave her the creditor name, the account number, the originating IP address, the date the inquiry was made. I told her I had not authorized this account and had not made any draws against it. She flagged it immediately, opened a fraud case, and told me the account would be frozen within the hour pending investigation. I then called each of the 3 major credit bureaus and placed a freeze on my credit. I called the Social Security Administration's fraud hotline and filed an initial report. I sent an email to my compliance supervisor, not because work was involved, but because she had once told me she had contacts at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, and I wanted to document that I had begun the reporting process at 5:15 inches the morning on a Sunday, so that no one could later claim I had delayed. By the time the sun was starting to come up over the mountains outside my window, I had done everything I could do before the business week started. I had built a paper trail in 4 hours. I had locked every door they could use. My phone had 6-7 new messages. I read the first few. They used words like monster, betrayal, ice cold, you'll regret this. My aunt said I had always been difficult. My grandmother, who was 83 and did not fully understand what was happening, sent a neckend that when I sat down for a moment, I breathed through it. Then I opened my contacts. I went through them the way I go through a billing file when I find an error carefully, completely, without flinching. I blocked my mother. I blocked my father. I blocked Daniel. I blocked my aunt. I blocked the cousins who had already texted. I blocked the numbers I didn't recognize. I did not do it in anger. I want to be precise about that. Anger was there, somewhere, but it wasn't what was running my hands. What was running my hands was clarity. The particular clarity that comes when you have been pretending not to see something for years and you finally let yourself see it fully. They had not made a desperate mistake. They had made a plan. They had taken my Social Security number information they had access to from years ago when I was still a teenager on their tax returns, and they had used it deliberately, strategically, to fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford, at my expense, without asking, without telling me, with the assumption that I would either never find out or that finding out would not matter because I would cover it anyway. They had bet on my compliance. They had bet on the version of me that answered every call and fixed every problem and never let the silence last too long. They had been placing that bet my whole life, and every time I paid up, I confirmed that the odds were in their favor. Not this time. I'm telling you this from 6 months out. I want to give you the rest of the story because the video I watched years ago that felt like mine had an ending that just cut off, and I always wanted to know what happened next. So here is what happened next. The fraud case with my bank was resolved in my favor within 3 weeks. The $18,500 line of credit was fully removed from my credit report. The inquiry was flagged as fraudulent and expunged. My credit score, which had dropped 41 points when the account was opened, fully recovered. The Portuguese estate filed a civil claim against the booking parties, my parents and Daniel, for the outstanding balance on the venue. Because the reservation had been made with fraudulent billing information and my name had been removed from liability per the fraud case, the estate pursued my father directly. He settled out of court for a reduced amount, which I was told through a family member I had not yet blocked. I did not verify this. It is not my problem. My brother came home alone. He did not contact me for 2 months. When he finally did, he sent a long email. It was not an apology exactly. It was more of an explanation, a careful, lawyerly document that described his behavior as a lapse in judgment during an emotionally compromised period. He said he hoped I would consider, in time, having a relationship with him. I read it twice. I did not respond. The federal fraud report is still open, as far as I know. I submitted the documentation and I don't monitor it. That's how it works. You file, you document, you let the system do what the system does. I am not chasing it. I reported a crime. What happens to that report is not mine to manage. My grandmother called me from my cousin's phone 3 months after I had done the blocking. I answered because she is 83 and I am not at war with her. She didn't ask me to forgive anyone. She didn't tell me I was wrong. She said she was proud of me, which was not something I had ever heard her say to me specifically before. She said she had watched me take care of everyone for a long time, and that she was glad I was taking care of myself now. I cried after I hung up. Just a little, standing in my kitchen in the middle of the afternoon. It was the kind of crying that doesn't mean you're sad, exactly. It means something was held very tight for a long time and finally got to let go. I have a therapist now. I started seeing her 2 months after everything happened. In our sessions, I have talked about what it means to be the functional one in a family that treats functionality as a resource to be harvested. I have talked about the specific loneliness of being relied on by people who do not see you. I have talked about why it took a federal crime for me to finally stop answering the phone. I am not healed. I don't think that's quite the right word or the right timeline. What I am is clear. I am clear in a way I haven't been in years, maybe ever. I know what I will accept and what I will not accept. I know the difference between love and leverage. I know that family is not a reason. It is not an excuse. It is not a blanket that covers everything done in its name. I still live in Denver. I still work in compliance. I am still, by most measures, the boring one, the one with the spreadsheets and the early bedtime, and the apartment that is paid for with my own unencumbered money. My brother would probably still say I'm hiding behind a desk. Maybe he's right. But the desk doesn't lie to me. The desk doesn't open credit accounts in my name while I'm sleeping. The desk doesn't call me 43 times at 4 a.m. to tell me that its problems have become mine. The morning after I filed the fraud report, I made coffee and stood at my window and watched Denver wake up. The mountains were pink at the edges where the sun was just starting to catch them. I drank my coffee slowly. I didn't rush. I had nowhere to be. I had nothing to fix. I had no one on hold waiting for me to produce a solution to a problem I hadn't created. The coffee was dark and strong, and it tasted like mine. I had earned that quiet. It had cost me more than I want to calculate. But it was mine, and no one had a key to it. And for the first time in my adult life, I was not waiting for the next phone call.